All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. I am so excited about this conversation today. Manju Bangalore is an engineer, an actor, and a future astronaut living my childhood dream. She'll be going into space next year with Virgin Galactic. We're here to talk about some of the amazing work that she's been doing, just the revolutionary, groundbreaking work on reproductive health, on menstruation health, and on just breaking this science barrier on something that hasn't been studied enough. Manju, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I've been a big fan of yours and how much you've just communicated what's right and what's just in the world. And I'm just really grateful to share space with you.
You're too kind. I meant it when I said that you're living my childhood dream. I was in eighth grade, voted most likely to be an astronaut, and so far I still have failed at that obligation. So I need to figure out something at some point in the future.
We'll get you on
Um,
our show too.
I'm saying we'll do it. We'll make it happen. So talk to folks about this amazing project that you are part of right now. And I hadn't heard about it until you educated me, and I'm grateful for that. And I want to share this with the world.
So I started an organization called Operation Period 11 and a half years ago at the age of 17. And I was basically having a really rough period. It was very painful. And I kind of had a moment of recognition where I realized I shouldn't be in that much pain. But at the same time, there were people less than a couple miles away that also didn't have menstrual products, housing, Midol, heating pads, all the stuff that I had. And what did it look like to create a world in which there was more equity and there's more access? And so I started Operation Period, and we started with menstrual product distribution. We got over 300,000 menstrual products to folks in need. And I can kind of talk through a bit later about the work that we've done. But one of the pillars now is our Redshift Lab, which is our research arm that we launched last year. And through that, we've announced OPO1, which is our first spaceflight mission. And it's also the first dedicated research mission to study menstruation in space. And I'm just really excited because my technical career has taken me through science and bioastronautics and astronautical engineering. And I never thought, even after working at two NASA centers and in the Obama White House, that I'd be able to kind of combine my technical skills with my social impact at Operation Period. So it's kind of crazy that we're doing it.
I mean, I've always said that if you're not at least a little bit crazy, there's something wrong with you because that's how you change the world. And I always love original ideas. And when I say original, I'm sure other people thought about this, but you're the first one to execute upon it. Kind of talk about that process because I'm just trying to envision writing a pitch deck of studying menstruation in space, and it's like, how do you even frame it? Like, what was the hook? What was like? Walk me through that process.
It was a process to be able
Yeah,
to communicate to the right audiences. And we're so
yeah,
grateful to have so many Family Foundation offices that are supporting this research. But one of the most compelling things that we've told folks across the spectrum has been that in 2023 was the first year that real menstrual blood was used to test menstrual products. Before that, they were using saline solution and sometimes red dye, and the dye is kind of useless in that scenario. And as anyone can imagine, saline solution doesn't have the same properties as menstrual blood. And so when these menstrual products have been tested for absorbency and efficiency, what ends up resulting is that doctors are underdiagnosing heavy menstrual bleeding, which we know baseline affects 20% of American menstruators. But when we're misdiagnosing or underdiagnosing that, we're missing all these other chronic conditions. And so that's an example of how it is here on Earth and why our Redshift Lab also does menstrual health research here on Earth. And then in space, not a lot of folks have menstruated in space. They often take contraceptives and then choose not to menstruate
sure.
just because of
Yep,
logistical reasons.
yep.
So we want to be able to study menstrual fluid dynamics and menstrual product performance because you might have heard the old story of Sally Ride, the first American woman going to space and getting offered 100 pads for 5 days,
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
not the right amount. And so let's figure out the right amount. And the last thing
yeah.
I'll say on that, the reason that story is particularly funny for folks in the space industry is because mass and volume considerations are so important in space.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
and one of our advisors was telling us that when they were packing the Apollo lunar lander, they had 12 Band-Aids in there and they narrowed it down to 6 because of how much they were considering mass and volume. And so even an
Wow.
offer of 100 tampons is a little wild.
Yeah. There's a funny clip. It's funny because of just how out of touch men are. Of a friend of mine, he's a poverty lawyer in Virginia, and he was advocating to eliminate the pink tax,
Mhm.
which I'll let you educate our audience about for those who may not know what that is. And one of the Republicans stood up and objected and said, "Why can't we just send a box once a year and let them figure it out?" And said it with a, like just full throated, like just to send one box once a year, and it'll be cheaper to buy in bulk, like at Costco, just without any sense of self awareness. And it's a very funny video because everybody laughs at him as he should be laughed at. But I mean, it speaks to a broader issue of the lack of education in this space and how it's not funny when it's actually costing lives and costing safety and security. And then you have these things like the pink tax, which only affect half the population. And I would never have to pay it, but every single woman out there has had to throughout her entire life. Can you talk a bit about that as well?
Yeah, so the pink tax is basically that it's like a luxury tax. That sales tax applies to menstrual products, but for example, doesn't apply to things like men's razors, which is so unfortunate that that's not considered a luxury item. Really, neither of them should be considered luxury items. And
Right.
so that's the additional tax that menstruators are paying when we purchase our menstrual products. And to your point about access, I think the more marginalized groups that we talk about within the menstruation demographic, the more specific we have to get because, for example, incarcerated menstruators in federal prisons sometimes only
Sure.
get 2 pads per month. And
Yeah.
from your perspective, from the human rights perspective, I mean, it's like egregious what we are putting
Yeah.
incarcerated menstruators through. And I won't get into the gory details, but when we hear about pregnant women getting shackled while they're giving birth
Yeah.
in prison
Horrifying.
and sexual assault being rampant by guards and stuff, it does become, to your point, a safety and security issue. And it's not just, oh, this is a little uncomfortable to talk about. It's like when we don't get comfortable being uncomfortable, people's lives are at risk.
Yeah, well said. I want to talk a bit more about this space trip because I'm fascinated by space, and I think this is an amazing breakthrough in just scientific knowledge and understanding of the human body. What is the long term play? What are we hoping to learn? Are you guys running experiments? Just kind of walk us through what this process is going to be, because it doesn't sound like it's going to be like there's not an Artemis 14-day trip around the moon. It's a little bit faster than that. But what is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish in this trip?
So this mission is called OP01, Operation Period O one, and the reason we've named it one is because we hope to do several other space flights beyond this one. This one is with Virgin Galactic on a suborbital space flight, so it'll be a same day science mission. And our goal is to basically build out this test bed, this payload that we're going to be testing menstrual product performance and menstrual fluid dynamics to be able to iterate upon and get data to be able to do eventual orbital flights and
Hmm.
potentially even lunar missions, where we just continue to prioritize and center menstrual health rather than treating it as an afterthought, as we have done for, unfortunately, centuries here on Earth.
I mean, is this something that in the long term we talk about colonizing the moon and having people live off world that to account for that? Is this do you foresee like maybe our great grandchildren will be citing you in the history books as the first kind of pioneer in this space?
I I don't think too much about legacy quite yet, but I do want this mission to also visibilize the work. I think this is a
Yeah.
very kind of glamorous way to talk about periods, and I don't think we need to go so far as to celebrating periods. I think just normalizing them is good enough, and just
Mhm.
treating it like a basic biological function. And I hope that this mission can kind of represent that while also achieving scientific outcomes towards that.
Yeah.
And yeah.
No, I'm glad you made that nuance, right? Because I think there's certainly a taboo to talk about
Mhm.
periods in public. There's a taboo to acknowledge the existence of menstruation, which is like fascinating to me that people are hesitant to talk about it. I don't understand quite why. It doesn't make any sense to me, but it's a reality that men are basically accountable for, which is again why I'm grateful to have you on here, and we can continue to have you back and talk more. Um, where do you see the culture shifting over the years? I mean, like what needs to happen for us to get to a point of normalization that this is a human body experience? This is not something unnatural or outward. I mean, how do we have those conversations to normalize it? And to help the next generation understand that there is an appropriate way to have this discussion that's healthy and safe and productive.
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. There's a quote in Spanish, and I'll translate it to English, but it's basically menstrual blood is the only blood not born of violence, but it's the one we're most ashamed of. And I think
Wow.
about that a lot because um, we are okay with, for example, a horror film or action
Sure.
film where people are bleeding left and right from gun violence and all sorts of things, and we don't really blink an eye. But if I were to throw a bloody tampon or pad in there, I'm sure a lot of people would have an issue. And so it comes down to, I think, cultural change. And one of the other programs, one of our other pillars of Operation Period is our Youth Institute for Menstrual Freedom, and we have named it that in honor of the Black Panthers Youth Institute. And part of what the Black Panthers, as many of y'all know, were really diligent about was cultural change. And I think that a lot of that starts with one-on-one conversations. I actually got a very timely message this morning from a man who said that they had heard about Operation Period, and it prompted them the next week to talk to their coworkers about getting menstrual products into their bathrooms. And he sent me a photo of now they have regular menstrual products in all the bathrooms. And
That's
so,
great.
yeah, those little conversations do add up quite a bit. And I think that it's really also advocates and allies like you that are breaking the kind of conversation and opening it up so that people like me can be platformed.
Yeah, I mean, we're all in this together, and I don't consider this like I'm doing anything special. This is kind of the bare bones, very basic minimum that any person should be doing to have these conversations and to elevate this discourse. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what inspired you? I know you shared your kind of origin story, but just this is something that's really significant to stick with long term, and I'm sure it hasn't been easy because you're trying to not only create something new that doesn't yet exist, but also fight this silly taboo. Um, uh, who are your mentors? How are you continuing to push forward? How are you ensuring that you're laser focused on making this sustainable long term?
Yeah, this organization has been my entire adult life. It's been the last 11 and a half years. And I've been so lucky to have so many people will see what the organization, what this movement can do. In 2020, I coined the term menstrual freedom to go beyond just access to products and advocate for abolishing the systems and barriers that prevent menstruators from operating with dignity and opportunity. And I guess a couple of things have sustained me. One is recognizing that this is a life or death issue. In 2018, I believe there was a 14-year-old girl in Kenya who died by suicide after the day prior, she had been shamed by her teacher and her classmates because she had started her first period and bled through her uniform. And she died by suicide the next day. And so, again, going back to that, this is a life or death issue. And it is costing us as a society and globally when we don't act upon this issue and protect and care for us and center us. And then I also think about Miriam Kaba's quote, which is hope is a discipline. And I think that that's so important to integrate it into our daily lives, like brushing our teeth every day. And I know you might resonate with this just being South Asian. And my dad was born in 1943 under British rule. It wasn't even my grandpa, it was my dad. And
Wow.
thinking about my grandparents survived multiple famines, they survived colonization. And how dare I be the first in my bloodline to lose hope when they dealt with crazy things and made it out. So
Yeah, and that's probably something that's not talked enough about. I mean, yeah, I'm born in Pakistan. My grandparents saw partition. My parents were born right around partition, and there's a lot of generational trauma from that partition, but there's also generational trauma from the centuries of colonization prior to, and that's a whole different conversation. But that colonization absolutely has impacted the South Asian psyche in many ways. Some in forms of resilience, some in forms of unfortunate anti-black racism that I think we've all seen in our communities and we're working against as well, but also some on issues like menstruation, on female health and female bodily autonomy, where it's not protected the way it should be, it's not respected the way that it should be. How can folks support the work you're doing? How can they be involved and kind of get behind you? And for those watching, that doesn't just mean retweeting and boosting. That also means contributing financially. So please do share all that.
yeah, no, I appreciate that. So just as context, there is no dedicated menstrual health funder in the country right now. And so we often have to appeal to like women in STEM organizations or mental health funders and make the pitch that menstruators are impacted by all these spaces. So therefore, you should be funding menstrual freedom-based work. So you can donate at operationperiod.org if you're interested. I also have a Substack, and I just turned on the paid tiers because I've been enjoying writing, and I know that community wants to support in that way as well. And I'm just really grateful that we have been able to sustain this movement. But all of our money right now goes to programmatic support, and general operating support is important as well because someone's got to keep the lights on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about some of the infrastructure in the last 5 minutes that we have here. What kind of legislative changes need to happen? And are there state models or federal models that we should look at that we can push forward to provide this better infrastructure and support to women?
One example of legislation that's not gotten through both houses at the state level is Massachusetts has the IAM bill that would basically guarantee access in public schools, shelters for the unhoused, and in state prisons and jails. Sometimes menstrual products are not provided at all, especially in prisons and jails. And so folks are having to barter and say, I'll give you my menstrual products if you give me your food for the day. Another terrible fact is that if you are incarcerated and you don't have products and you free bleed into your uniform is considered state property. And so when you bleed into it, it's considered destruction of state property, and it can lead to a higher sentence or a fine. And so these things are I know you talk about this, that these things are how the system was built out, is designed this way. Nothing's broken. It's literally working as intended. And so there are so many pieces of legislation like the IM bill at the state level or the Menstrual Equity for All Act at the federal level that we can be supporting to. And when I say institute the bare minimum, menstrual product access is the very bare minimum to supporting us as menstruators.
As a civil rights lawyer, I think about, is there a lawsuit there to force somebody to suffer a longer sentence because of something that was completely out of their control? There's no intent. I mean, a crime requires intent, and you cannot argue that there's intent there because it's a bodily function, and there's no other possible option. There has to be some kind of a civil rights violation there, or a violation of due process of law. And I'd be curious to look into that. I may have to do some research on that. Thanks. I mean, again, I had no idea. And, honestly, I consider myself pretty informed on these things because I read a ton. And this is really critical knowledge you're sharing with us today as well. We've got several hundred people watching, which is awesome. The comments are fantastic. People are really appreciative of this. And so all of y'all watching and listening, make sure you go to Manju's Substack and subscribe. Talk to us as we wrap up. When are you going? From where are you going to be launching? All those details.
So our suborbital space flight for OPO1 will be next year, probably in the top half of the year, and we'll be launching out of New Mexico, out of Truth and Consequences is the name of the area. And it will be a same-day science mission. We're hoping to be able to publish on that research and then build towards future space flights while we also continue our 11 years of Earth-based work.
Are you going to be? Are people going to be able to report on it? Like, if I fly to New Mexico to watch, is that a thing?
Yes, we can absolutely get you a press pass. I would love to do that.
Count me in. Like let me know the dates. I will be there. That's amazing. Like, I would absolutely love to be there. I may not be able to go into space myself, but if I can get close enough, maybe I can sneak on board or something. We'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. Manju, thank you so much for the work you're doing. This is, to me, human rights work. This is incredible. It's groundbreaking. It's scientific, engineering breaking, whatever the right term is. I wish I was a scientist. I'm not that smart, but I really appreciate the work you're doing. And I'll let you close this out. What's the last thing you want to communicate to folks before we close it out?
I just really appreciate your time. And if you do one thing, even if it's not actively speaking about menstrual freedom or centering menstruators, if you can just not laugh when someone makes a crappy sexist joke, that is already rejection enough of this kind of model we built out that criminalizes us and dehumanizes us. And so it's as simple as just being quiet when someone makes that crappy joke.
I love that. Makes a huge difference. Thank you so much, Manju, for the work you're doing. And we hope to have you back on soon.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for tuning in to Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. We'll be back next time. Peace out.